Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. To be honest, it has been a couple of weeks of just sitting here on the couch. I have just not had any energy to do what I'm supposed to, or any kind of thought or mental capacity to get to work. And all that I found that works was to get up, put in my nice earrings, put on some sort of podcast or political commentary, which I really enjoy these days, and get my mind off of what I'm supposed to be doing and just start doing it. And what made this even worse is that this is the last couple of weeks of summer here. There's so much going on. If you have a garden, you know that this is the time that you're harvesting and processing a lot of food and preserving. And then also we want to be enjoying our time outside while the weather is really nice. I usually feel very inspired at this time of year, so I am just a little down that I am not feeling very energized at the moment. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one that feels this way, and that sometimes this just happens to us and it's hard to get the mental capacity or just drive to get some things done. I just wanted to come on here and say that that happens to me also, and I'm learning how I can help myself and what I need to do to be able to kind of mind over matter and get the things done that are necessary. But sometimes I definitely do just sit here and get help. And as I'm cleaning, you can see that I've got a giant tub of apples, which we got gifted from some friends, and I really wanted to turn it into applesauce. And so over multiple days, I am peeling and coring and slicing these apples and turning them into applesauce by cooking them on the stove and then keeping it in the fridge until I had enough to actually can. And I didn't do all this myself. I did have some help from friends, which was really nice, because by the end I pretty well felt like an apple processing all of these apples. But surprisingly, this many apples only jarred about 4 quart jars and 1 pint jar, so not even all that much applesauce. And if I were to do this again in future, I probably would invest in a apple peeler, although these apples needed a whole lot of extra processing, like cutting out bad spots or wormy bits. And so I don't really know if that's the perfect solution, although it would take care of a lot of the peeling, so maybe it's worth it. Now it seems like I'm not getting very much done, and honestly it didn't feel like I was over many days, but this is a big task and I'm so glad to have gotten it done, even though I just did a little bit every day. And by the end, I was able to reheat some of the applesauce I had been saving in the fridge, filled up some jars, and then processed the last bit of apples that I had cored and sliced the day before, and filled 2 more quart jars and 1 pint jar. Now the directions for canning applesauce is to leave a 1/2 inch headspace, which on a wide mouth jar is this upper lip. So I'm just making sure that I'm not exceeding that limitation here. And then I got out my big canning pot, which takes such a long time to heat up. And so this time I thought I'd get a head start by heating up the water so long while I'm waiting for the rest of the applesauce to process, because it only takes a couple of minutes. Well, by the time I had wiped my jars, put on my caps and my lids, the water was quite hot, and I guess putting in the jars into such hot water unfortunately led one of my jars to crack, and so sadly we lost one. So maybe I would caution against doing that, or at least heating it up to the point where your jars are really impacted by the heat. Once your jars are ready, you are processing them in this water bath canner for 20 minutes once the water is boiling, and then removing them and keeping them on the countertop to cool off for a couple hours or overnight. Well, after a week of not feeling all that great, I am feeling excited to get in the kitchen this morning and bake something before we head to church. And it feels good to be inspired and energized to get back in the kitchen. So let's go. The first thing I did was make some oat flour with some of the oats that we have. So I just added 3 cups of oats to my food processor and then blended it until it was fine. I love that this is such an easy way to make oat flour. and then I cored a few more of the apples that I had left over from the applesauce, took away any of the grimy parts, and then added a cup of raspberries with a little bit of water and cinnamon and let that come to a boil on the stove. Once it was boiling, I turned it down to a simmer and then let that simmer for about 10 minutes so that the fruit can get nice and soft, almost like a jam-like consistency. While that was going, I was getting the crusty bit ready, which isn't really a crust, but sort of is, by adding the oat flour and then 1 more cup of oats just for a little bit of texture with cinnamon and salt. Mix that together and then ready a half a cup of coconut oil. I'll leave a recipe in the description box if you want to follow along. I read it in a book a little while ago and now I'm just making something along the lines of. So I melted the coconut oil and then mixed everything together. Added in a little bit of maple syrup just to sweeten it a touch. And then this is the basic crust, or crumb I guess, of the dessert. And now I'm taking 2/3 of that and putting it into my pan with some parchment paper, putting about 2/3 of it into the base, and then I'm going to pour over the fruit sauce after I've mashed it and added a little bit of vanilla. And that is going to be the jammy fruit part of this treat. And I added a little bit of applesauce because I felt like we could have used just a little bit more fruit. I think the apples I was using was just a little smaller than the usual 4 apples I use. So I just added a little bit of the applesauce I already had to make a little bit more of the fruit. Once I spreaded it onto the oat layer, I added the rest of the oats that I had left over on top to kind of have like a crumbly top resemblance. Now I had too little left, so my guesswork was a little off today. So I just quickly whipped up a little bit more with some oat flour I had, some more oats and maple syrup. I didn't add the coconut oil, which I definitely would recommend you do. It doesn't bake as well without the coconut oil. But anyway, it was good. Got ready for church and it came out just in time before we had to leave for church. So that was us this week. I'm so glad to be feeling better and back in the kitchen. Thank you for following along. I know the content has not been my usual and I'm happy to be feeling much better and excited to get back to all things cooking and baking and preserving and back out in the garden. And I've got lots to share this week as we also pick up our meat bulk order. So there's lots going on and I appreciate you following along and supporting our channel. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and week. Cheers. Bye.